and I read the script, and I liked it very much. I thought it was really good. And then at some point, I found out that Roddy was going to be playing Peter Vincent, and for me, that was like, oh, this is perfect. And so that was a huge thrill for me. I had grown up likewise watching Night Gallery and Planet of the Apes and all that stuff.
Roddy had just finished a movie I wrote called Class of '84. And he's absolutely wonderful in that. And he brings you to tears. And I knew that he could have a chance of getting the pathos in Peter Vincent.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah, that's the thing about Roddy, is all of his characters they were sort of maybe on a dark trajectory, but he managed to find this real warmth, and heartfelt performance inside of him. So he's perfect. He's perfect for the role. It's kismet.
He was the loveliest man, and this one. We were all just these, young actors just starting our careers, and here was Roddy McDowall and Chris Sarandon as well. But Roddy was an icon already in Hollywood, and he met each of us on equal ground. And nothing makes you feel safer as a young actor than to have someone of such stature greet you and work with you as if we are equals. And that's the thing I think I was struck by the most. He was the most humble and generous and kind, funny, self-deprecating. And the irony is he knew he was kind of a B actor, right, Tom? I mean, he knew that he knew every A-list, he knew everyone in Hollywood. But he also never quite made it to that, complete peak. And even though he's beloved. And so here he was playing a sort of B actor, and I think it was a rich experience because it was so personal for him. And he was just so personal to all of us, so special man.
Yeah, I just, when I first heard that he was going to be in it, it was like, I remember seeing him at the drive-in with my family in Planet of the Apes, and I'm like, wow, I'm going to be working with this guy. And it just, it was really, really special. And, he added so much integrity to the mix, and actually working with him, I wasn't starstruck, it was like, he was, like Amanda said, he was just an equal actor. We got along pretty well, for the most part. It was so much fun being with this guy. He was really, really special.
Didn't like him. No, I'm kidding. He was a great guy. I didn't work with him that much, but I do remember when you're shooting a movie, the actors spend so much time sitting around waiting for the camera to get to the right shot, the lighting and everything like that. So there's tons of time. You sit around so much more than you actually act. But I remember Roddy never went to his trailer. He sat with us and he would tell stories about Hollywood. And honestly, it was one of the most thrilling things I can remember, just listening to him tell these stories. And I knew they were true. And some of them were really interesting. But he was a great man. And when he was on the set acting with us, he gave as much or more than any of us. He was terrific.
Stayed for off-camera lines too, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He stayed for off-camera lines, and a lot of actors do not do that.
I have one Roddy story. Like Jonathan, I didn't work with him too closely either. The only scene I worked with him really directly was the scene in which you transform back from a wolf into a young boy, right? Remember that?
Yeah, but
that
vaguely.
Disaster. You vaguely remember that?
I still have nightmares.
Well, what happened was it was meant to be a 4-person makeup job that I told the producers and the director, we should probably call him Tom. It would take 12 hours, which is an outrageous thing. I mean, you put this guy in makeup for 12 hours and he's going to shoot another 6. It'll take 3 hours to get him out of it, the poor bastard. But what happened is one of my artists didn't show up. And so then suddenly it took 18 hours to do the makeup, just to do the makeup. And so the producers were incensed. the director, we should call him Tom, was kind of volcanically enraged about it. Steven, he had nothing, he couldn't say anything because he just put glue and arrow and painting.
You gave me something.
Don't start with that. Don't start with that. I accidentally put glue in his mouth. We're talking about another story. So all these other people were kind of cool about it, but Roddy thought it was funny because he'd been around the block, you know, one more time in most of this. Yes, and I did accidentally put glue in your mouth, like a Three Stooges routine.
Tom, I know before we spoke about the fact that when you were rehearsing Fright Nights, you guys treated this very much sort of like a play, where you guys would get together and sort of stage things out and everything like that. Can you talk about using that approach, and for the actors, can you guys talk about how much that benefited the
It
performance?
was my first film, and don't ask me why I got more rehearsal time than I've ever gotten in any other film. And what we did is we did a table read, and then we started to break it down scene by scene. And then we started to define the characters. And then we started to find the funny moments, believe it or not. And you rehearse and you find out what's there. You know, and so it was blocked out. I finally went to a sound stage and I had all the sets were there, and I had it sketched out on the floor in white tape, and we ran the whole thing through. And I had Colin Higgins down. And Colin Higgins then was a very, very hot Hollywood director. And the Columbia wanted to know that there was somebody backing me up. And it worked like a play. Fright Night carried on its own, and we did it all the way through. And you could see it and feel it working. And once we started to shoot, because we'd rehearsed it, I hardly had to say anything.
There were very few rewrites either. I don't remember any rewrites at all. It was just sort of what was on the page is what we did. And, yeah, we played like a play.
I want to ask you, Tom, about I know you've got something at your table, the comic book that you are now, it's like a new comic book about adventures, like Peter Vincent adventures.
Right.
What was the approach there? Talk about
There was a Fright Night comic in the early 90s that was successful, and then after about 2.5 years, it went away. And people kept asking me about it, so we're relaunching it. And I have the first comic book, the first edition at my table. And if any of you are around tomorrow, please come and take a look. And I mean, so I'm trying to launch, this is, you know, well, it's the Peter Vincent Chronicles. Because, I mean, if you listen to people, Peter Vincent is Bengali, except he can fight back, you know, and it seems that that people want to know more about everybody, but especially Peter Vincent. So, you know, so the comic book does that, and it's set up. So as the adventures go along, the next one he's going to call Charlie in for help.
I have a question for Steve. The makeup effects, the look of the vampires and the creatures in the movie is so unique, and it was something that came out of nowhere. The vampires didn't look like that until Fright Night. Where did the designs come from in your head? And because they're just so unique and so amazing. Tell me a little bit about how you thought of the look of the vampires.
So completely, you have to give credit to Tom for this, because I was completely against it. Because I said, Tom, how are you? No werewolves transform. Vampires don't transform. They grow fangs. And Tom's like, no, we could do it. I'm like, they haven't done this since Nosferatu, and I didn't think the audiences would buy it. So it came from Tom. It's his fault.
I inherited the best effects team in Hollywood at that moment. These guys came over literally from Ghostbusters. So they went from one of the most expensive movies made that year in Hollywood to one of the least expensive. But they still brought the talent with them.
Speaking about the effects, for those of you who actually had to undergo the effects,
If you start talking about those contact lenses,
I didn't bring
I'm
up the
out.
contacts.
I'm sorry, what?
I didn't bring up the contacts.
Contact lenses?
The contacts are a little controversial, but I wanted to ask for, you know, Amanda, you had a pretty
Contact lenses?
That's it. That's enough.
I guess we're talking about contact lenses, but you guys, I mean, you know, all three of you had some pretty audacious transformations
Contact
in
lenses.
this movie. Maybe with contact lenses, maybe without. Can you guys talk about that process for you? Because I'm guessing this is not something you guys had encountered before this film.
No, certainly not. And nor did I wear glasses or contact lenses prior to making Fright now. Now, I have no comparison to what Stephen went through, because that 18-hour transformation was beyond belief. And Tom tells this story better than I can, but the moment where I reveal that mouth was a last-minute decision. However, the transformation for Amy throughout was very subtle, and I loved it because it was subtle. And I started with this little sexy baby pair of fangs and one set of lenses, and then they grew, and then the lenses, and then they grew, and then the lenses. So I, not being used to contact lenses, you know, when they put them in, it was alien, it was weird, and you could hardly see anything, but you know, I could make it through. And then this one time they were put in, and I was just, oh my goodness,
This is not a true story, by
this
the way.
is a true story. And it was just, what's happening? And I didn't want to squeak the wheel. We're getting ready to shoot. There's so many things going on. And then all of a sudden I was just, hello, hello. And they pulled them out, and what happened was, in their haste, they had forgotten to sand the back of the page of the lens. Thank
Urban
God
legend.
my eyes survived contact lenses. Anyway, but that was the least of it. When I was in my full makeup, it was about 6 hours in the chair. And I think Chris was what, 8, 10, 8? Okay.
He was so fed up with it, he started helping do the
No,
his
he
own
did his
makeup.
fingers. Yes, I remember that. But Tom, tell a little bit about the story with the shark.
I was blocking the scene on the set, and we were going to shoot the following Monday, I think.
No, it was the very next day.
Oh, the very next day. Oh, very next day. I didn't give me any time at all. Anyway, so it's she and Billy are talking at the bottom of the stairs, and she turns away. She says, "Billy, you promised Charlie, you promised you'd protect me." And she turns away, and he's feeling terribly guilty. And he takes a step forward, and then she came back, and she looked just like she did. And I'm looking at it. I thought, there's a huge screen there. And don't ask me how I know this kind of stuff, but I did. And so I went to Steve, who's a genius, by the way. And I said, "Can you give me a mouth for tomorrow?"
And I said no.
And, and I said, "I don't care how bad it is, give me the mouth," because I knew the cut was going to work. And so he threw together the shark mouth. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how she wore it. And he was very uncertain about the quality, to put it mildly. And it ends up being one of the most, if not the most famous image from the movie and on the one sheet.
Tom, what you said was, don't worry about it, Steve. Nobody will even remember it.
I have a question for the cast that's up here. Were you guys horror film fans before you made Fright Night? And are you horror film fans now? And what are some of your favorites?
My favorite horror movie is Fright Night.
I haven't seen that one. I have to check that out. I grew up, as a horror fan. I used to read Eerie magazine and Creepy magazine. And my dad was a pharmacist. He got it at the pharmacy. I grew up watching Night Gallery, Twilight Zone, and The Exorcist. I snuck in and saw. And I like creepy, spooky, not always seeing things, or kind of more my forte for enjoyment. But yeah, The Changeling.
Yeah, I know I'm gonna be hated by most of the audience, but you know, like the Friday the 13th stuff, and I like movies that have suspense, you know, and the element of surprise. I love Alfred Hitchcock, and Tom incorporated those elements into this film like crazy. And when I first saw the movie in a theater, I had no idea about, you know, Amanda's. I was just blown away. I mean, the whole audience is, you know, but that's the kind of horror movies I like. I mean, like The Exorcist, The Birds, and that type of thing.
I was like I've been a horror fan forever. I got all the horror magazines, and I had all the models. Remember the Aurora models? I do those, and my mother would buy me fighter jets. And she'd go, don't you want to put this together? No, I like Dracula. But I think my favorite horror movie of all time is the 1963 adaptation of The Haunting. It's amazing. It's an amazing film, and I've always loved that film.
Why even bother asking me? I came out of the womb loving this stuff.
Okay. All right, so we're going to open it up to you guys now. So, and I'm going to be out here with the mic, so raise your hand. You guys can ask these guys questions right in the front row. Keep your questions ready and raise your hands when I get over to you.
What was it like in this movie? I mean, there was a lot of innocence in the movie, and you don't see a lot of movies like that nowadays, you know. And yeah, I love movies. And
No, it's not. It's really interesting that part of Amy's transformation. I don't get the redhead thing. I don't know. But yes, you know, she blossoms, and it was important that happened in a voluptuous way. And so I do remember that morning about 4:30 in the morning at some bizarre warehouse in the middle of I don't know where, with these guys who were
Marina Del Rey. I was there.
nervous to slap. I just took my shirt off and they slapped plaster on my chest. It's like, whatever you need to do, it's okay. And then they built these beautiful breasts. I mean, and that gown that was designed, and that too was just a wonderful.
And she auctioned them off at a convention a few years ago.
I carried them around for years. I don't know. In a C's candy box. I don't know why. It's the one thing I kept.
Tell them who bought them.
What?
Tell them who bought the breast.
Okay, no, that's okay. John, you can tell.
Steve Johnson bought the breast.
I did not. It's funny though.
Yeah, I always wondered why, at the end of the movie, why Jerry was, I guess, stupid enough to not once but twice tell Peter Vincent that he needed faith for it to work on him. I mean, the one time, I guess, okay, but by the very second time, it seems just like, really, you're just asking to be beat at this point.
Did I do it twice?
We'll find out tonight, so we better be sure.
The second time it worked, didn't it? Okay, so he'd gone through a transition, hadn't he?
Well, the first time,
I mean, that was the idea. I don't think I had the specific moment. You know, we live in a secular society, and God knows Hollywood is that. But that was the idea behind it. I should have, what you're asking for is why didn't I have the moment where he found it? I was trying to show he found it within himself. It's like when he goes through the door into the Dandridge house when it swings open. He wanted to go around to the back, but he found the courage within himself because his friends were in trouble. That's the idea.
This one's for Tom. I just wanted to know what you thought about the 2011 remake, and maybe what some of the other cast members thought about it as well.
Well, you know, that's very, very hard because, like, you know the people. I thought it was really, really well done, but I don't know what the hell it had to do with Fright Night. Okay, I mean, Fright Night works because somebody said it, but because of the humanity. It works because it's got humor, because the situation is, it's a funny situation. You know, a teenage horror fan saying there's a vampire next door. That's funny. You got to deal with that. But
I think it also works because of, you know, in our Fright Night, there's an innocence to everyone. You know, even the vampire in a way, and the remake sort of knew everything going into it, and it just sort of took a little bit of the what we all feel in a first-time situation, which is innocence. You know, the magic. It sort of pulled that out of it, and otherwise you just got the names and the basic plot and all that stuff.
you could have called it 30 Days of Night Part 2. I mean, you know, but so it didn't have. Somebody purposefully did not want. Well, there's an old saying. Oh well, the hell with it. You know, every.
Let it go, let it out.
Well,
let it
I mean,
out, let it out.
every script's like a fire hydrant. Every dog has to piss on it. You know? So they rewrote it, and I don't know who they thought they were going to appeal to. You'd think that they would look at what made the first one such a success, and you would use those values. And one of that is Peter Vincent, who has the hero's journey. He starts out as a coward who doesn't believe in anything, certainly not vampires. And he finds out they're real, and he's got to rise to the occasion or not. And the nub of that is in the scene when Charlie goes to Peter Vincent after he's lost Amy in the disco. And he says, "Peter, please help me." And Peter tells him that he's a total fake and a phony. And yet somehow they managed to get there. And he says, "Peter Vincent isn't even my real name." I don't know what Peter Vincent's real name is. But I mean, but that moment, that's the heart of the movie. And none of that was in the supposed remake. So no, I didn't like it.
All right, two more questions
But I
and then we're done.
respected it.
Go ahead.
Okay, this question is for Jonathan. Jonathan, so you were shot in the head. So were you undead? Were you zombie?
Well, you know what? It was just sloppy writing. Ask this guy over here. He wrote it. I just did what they told me to do.
I figured he was a halfling. You'd call him a ghoul too, but I mean he's somebody who's been turned into a slave by Jerry Dandridge. But Jerry Dandridge has drunk of his blood, but he has not exchanged any of. He's drunk of Charlie's blood, but he hasn't given Charlie any of his. So he hasn't totally transformed him or brought him over to the other side. He's the Renfro character from Dracula? Renfield. Or Renfield from Dracula.
Okay, last question, right over here.
Okay. Well, my questions for kind of like everyone up there, but mostly Tom. But like, what are your feelings on how like the Twilight portrayed vampires versus the ones in your movie? Sorry if that doesn't make sense, but it's kind of.
Twilight versus Fright Night. You want to take that on, Tom?
I don't really think I can. The vampire is a symbol, and it changes with each new generation in the popular culture. And so you get a YA, love story, which is terrific. I'm thrilled. And they'll change again and again. When I did Fright Night, everybody thought vampires as a genre were dead. No pun intended. I mean, they had a terrible disaster with Dracula the musical, with Robert Wise directing, huge Broadway hit, terrible, failed as a movie. And then they went to farce with Love at First Bite with George Hamilton. Yeah. And if you do farce, it means the genre's exhausted. When they start becoming self-reverential, it's through. Needs a rest. Somebody's got to come along and reinvent it. And that's what Fright Night was. And it kicked off another 30 or 40 year run of vampires. Who knew?
Ladies, gentlemen, Steve Johnson, thank you all so much.
Thanks for coming out. Enjoy the movie, guys.
Thank you for coming.